Yeah, good morning, friends. This is an extra lecture which we missed on 6th due to certain emergency that I had. That's why we have not conducted lecture on that day. So that missing lecture I am continuing today. And please remember, whenever we will miss the lecture, we are going to have an extra lecture on Sunday without fail. Now, yesterday we have discussed how Aristotle has given primacy to plot over other constituents of tragedy. And even we have discussed that Aristotle's emphasis on primacy of plot is reflected in the amount of space he allocates to plot. As I said yesterday also that chapters from 17 to 14 are devoted to analysis of entirely analysis of plot. There are three stages in this analysis. Chapter 7 to 9 specify the minimum condition for which any plot must satisfy if it is to be called as, if it is to be known as well-formed plot. From the end of chapter 9 and the next two chapters, those chapters distinguish between two kinds of plot, simple plot and complex plot. And since Aristotle prefers that complex plots are most suitable for tragedy in technical sense, the discussion goes and moves beyond the minimum requirement of any plot that begins to consider what makes one well-formed plot better than the other one. And this question is tackled more systematically in the next chapters, chapter 13 and 14, which address the questions of best kind of tragic plot. Up to this, we have discussed yesterday. Let us resume the discussion today. The definition at the beginning of chapter number 6, it stated that tragedy is an imitation of an action that is complete and has certain magnitude. I'll repeat the definition once again. The definition appears in chapter number 6, at the beginning of chapter number 6, that tragedy is an imitation of an action that is complete and has certain magnitude. Now, these two concepts are taken up in chapter number 7. The exposition of the concept of completeness, or you can say wholeness, it introduces the famous dictum. What does it mean by whole? What does it mean by complete? This we have to understand when Aristotle is saying the thing is complete in itself and has certain magnitude. Complete, what is meant by complete? What is meant by wholeness? Complete means the whole. WHOLE. What is wholeness? And there's a very famous dictum. A whole is that which has beginning, middle, and end. What do you mean by whole? Whole is that which has beginning, middle, and end. Now, this is not, despite it appear to be, but this is not a simple observation. To call something a beginning, a middle, or an end in Aristotle's sense is not simply to comment on the position in the series in which it happens to have. When we call something as a beginning, middle, and end, we had certain idea in our mind, and that is what Aristotle is pointing out. In Aristotle's sense, it is not simply to comment on the position in which all the series which it happens in the action to have. The positions are not described even randomly, the positions are necessary. Now, Aristotle is talking about an ordered structure. Now, his definition of beginning, middle, and end, it shows that Aristotle is very much focusing on the two aspect of the structure of plot, which he wants to bring out when he uses these terms. First, plot consists of a connected series of events, we know it. One thing follows another as a necessary consequences. Second, the plot consists of self-contained series of events. First, the plot consists of connected series. That means one thing happens after another, and it is a response, or it is what you can say. Uh, it is a necessary consequences. As a necessary consequences, events are connected with each other. But every event which is connected with each other, every plot itself consists of self-contained series of events. The first thing in the series is, in some sense, self-explanatory. It is not a necessary consequence of something else. And equally, the last event in the series brings it to a definite end. There is no further consequences, necessary consequences in the series. You can use another term for this self-containment, which is called as a closure, end. Now, the series of events which constitutes a well-formed plot is the therefore closed at both the ends and connected in between. The series of events, they are closed at both the ends, because what a plot is talking about something, some necessary action which is beginning, which is consequences, which is having self-contained events. And then because it has got self-contained event, and necessary consequences are taking follows one another, and it reaches to end when there is no further necessary consequences are there in the series, then there is a closure. That means a plot, a series of events of a well formed plot is, you can say, therefore closed at both the ends, and it is connected in between. Now let us consider it by the way of, let us understand it by the way of illustration of a simple story. Now we'll use one simple story, that X strangled a cat. Okay, I'm telling you a story. X, or may I take, I'll take certain names. That Bill strangled a cat. Ben strangled a cat. Now, these are the two characters, Bill and Ben. Bill strangled a cat. Ben strangled a cat. Now, this is not a complete plot in Aristotelian term. This is not a complete plot. Now, these two events, Bill strangled a cat, Ben strangled a cat. Now, these two events have no necessary connection. So, let us modify this two lines, this plot, this story. Bill strangled Ben's cat. So Ben strangled Bill's cat in retaliation. Now there is a connected series. Now this is something better. Okay. This has some action to it. That these are the two separate events supposed to be, when I said earlier that Bill strangled cat, Ben strangled cat. These are supposed to be two different events. Now, if you want to make it a complete well-formed plot, you need to make it close in between two, beginning and end. Then we will start it that Bill strangled Ben's cat. So in retaliation, this is necessary action, necessary consequence. So Ben strangled Bill's cat. Now we can see how the two events hang together, or the series of events is you will find out connected with each other. But the question remains, but is it self-contained? Because what we discussed a little bit, that first a plot is consist of connected series of events, one follows on another as a necessary consequences, and second the plot consists of self-contained series of events. This is the second we talked about. Now the first item that we discussed fulfilled here in this story, that Bill strangled Ben's cat. So in retaliation, Ben strangled Bill's cat. Now this is the first thing. Consists of series of events. One follows another as a necessary consequences. Now the second, will it fulfill the second criteria? But is it self-contained? Now the question comes, why did the cat strangled at first? How it started? Why you are strangling the cat? What are the reasons behind it? Are Bill and Ben mad? Or is Bill mad to strangle the cat of Ben? Why he strangled the cat of Ben? And was that the end of it? Now let us make it once again. Now we will put certain reasons into it. Now we can make it that Bill thought that his cat will uh, lose to Ben's cat in one of the popular cat show of the town. So he strangled Ben's cat. Ben, in retaliation, strangled Bill's cat. And then they never spoke to each other again. Now, this is the story. Now, we are satisfied that, okay, yes, this is what we can call it as a story because it has completed the whole process. It has a beginning, that why Bill strangled Ben's cat, what is the consequences, everything is having its own explanation. So we will say that yes, this is what we are expecting. It is the story is connected and even self-contained as it is satisfying the Aristotle's criteria. Criteria for what he calls it as whole or completeness. Because if you remember the definition once again that he used, the tragedy is an imitation of action that is complete and has magnitude. And we are talking about what is meant by complete, whole, wholeness, completeness, or you can say wholeness. What is mean by complete? We are talking about that because every story is having all those things. Now, the story which I told you for the sake of illustration of connected series and self-contained events. Now it has few other virtues, but at this stage we are simply talking about the minimum criteria for being a well-formed plot. We are not talking about what are the qualities that makes one plot better than another. We are not talking of that. We're talking about a minimum criteria. Aristotle is often quoted as if he had said that a play has beginning, middle, and end. It is often quoted like this. But we can say that this is wrong, how he is quoted. Misquoted always. It is not Aristotle said that the plot should have beginning, middle, and end. Plot itself, the plot itself, underlying sequence of actions that has this sort of structure. Every plot has its own structure, and this type of structure suits for tragedy. Now, if you read, I'll give an example. An example of a Harold Pinter's very interesting play called Betrayal. Now, the play Betrayal, why I'm taking this example, this is very interesting play. The play is talking about a broken relationship. And when it is talking about broken relationship, the play traces the breakdown of relationship in reverse chronological order. It is reverse chronological order in Betrayal. The opening scene shows the end of the process, and the scene progresses backward in time to the beginning. You'll find out this type of tricks nowadays played very commonly on web series or on in films, on all these science types of OTT platforms, web series appearing on these OTT platforms. You will find out these type of tricks are taking place because if a reverse chronological order is taken, then the audience will stay for a long and will it will capture the attention of the audience, and they will attentively watch all the things. So the plot, because if you say that Aristotle mentioned beginning, middle, and end, and if you are firm to this particular structure, then betrayal is not carrying the same sort of idea that you are following, but instead, if you understand very carefully that the events which in Aristotle's terms are nothing but the object being imitated. Now, if it runs in opposite direction to the play which the action imitates it, the beginning of the one is the end of the other, and vice versa. You can take a classical example of very famous epic written by Homer, Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. Now, there Odysseus wandering. Now, this wandering of Odyssey are included within the story of his homecoming. It included a story of his homecoming by a way of a retrospective narrative, which is placed in the mouth of Odysseus himself. Now, if wandering are counted as a part of the plot, then the order of events which the text follow and plot, the order of event that we use to understand with plot, both the things are different. If the events, if they are not counted as part of plot, then the part of the text is devoted to something other than the exposition of the plot. In either case, that if you are wondering, if you are not considering wandering as counted as part of plot and the order of events that text explains, and if you are restricted to the idea of plot, both the things are different. Now, in either case, text and plot are distinct. Please understand. Text and plot, both the things are distinct. Don't consider that what text means, what text is a plot. No, text is different, plot is different. Text is a written thing coming in front of you. Plot, you can say what Aristotle tried to put it in Poetics with a mathematical calculation. If you consider this as the text begins with wandering of Odyssey, and it is included within the story of his homecoming, and The whole narrative is having a retrospective narrative is placed in the mouth of Odyssey. Then the events appearing in text are not following what the idea of plot you are having with you. In that case, text and plot are distinct, and that's why we come to a conclusion that plot is not coextensive with the play. The plot is not coextensive with the play. Aristotle refer Aristotle can refer to parts of the plot which fall outside of the play. Aristotle can refer parts of the plot which fall outside of the play. Please understand. The play which you studied, the play which you read. If you look at the play which we discussed in last semester, Taimurle, part 1. Now, when Taimurlen is entering to conquer rest of the things, we are not familiar with who is Taimurlen, from where he come from. The text started his entry that appears in the text, but before that, some events has taken place. Some event has even took place before appearing into the text, which is off the play. And because the thing has taken place at of the play, that is an consequence of it that we are now focusing on in the text. So Aristotle is referring to parts of the plot which fall outside of the play also. That's why the reader should be careful not to forget that the level of abstraction at which Aristotle is working throughout the chapters on the plot. He's concerned here with the construction of verbal artifacts, which are called as tragedies. But with the design of the pattern of events which underline them, we have to understand that also. Then and then we can say that it is complete, it is whole. Completeness lies in it. If we think that the play starts with this particular text, and if you are thinking that this particular text which is carrying the story begin from this particular point, no, the story has something before it appears into the play, and it will have something after it comes to an end. If you are thinking about, or suppose for example, if you are looking at Hamlet, the play begins with Hamlet's entry to his kingdom, and then the ghost says that, okay, I'm been killed. And from that point, the story starts to us. The ghost narrates the things happened in past. Now, when ghost is narrating the thing to Hamlet, we have to understand that why ghost is saying these things to Hamlet, because he's his only son? No. There might be some good relationship, there might be some healthy relationship, there might be something in between Hamlet and his father. The close relationship of Hamlet and his father leads the ghost of Hamlet's father to tell everything to his own son and ask him to take the revenge. That means something has happened before this that is also part of the plot, which is not appearing in the text. And therefore, Aristotle means completeness. There is a beginning, middle, and end. It doesn't mean that there should be starting point. That text refers is mean by plot? No, there may be some starting point which is not referred into the text, which we have to understand as a reader, which we have to understand as an audience, that there is some starting point before this, and the person who understands this can able to understand the whole idea of what is meant by plot, the whole idea of what is meant by completeness. Otherwise, what will happen if you are thinking as a reader that the story begins in the text from this particular point, that means this is the beginning, and the story comes to an end at the end of the text, that means it is an end. No, I've given you two different examples in front of you, my friends. One is of Harold Pinter's betrayal, and second, Odyssey. If you look at the two different texts with the two different examples in front of you, that means something of the story, something of the story, because as I said, it has, when you are say beginning, middle, and end, it has got a closed structure, series of events connect with each other. One event is happening due to the consequence of the other event. The event itself is complete in itself. It carries events in it. The plot carries an event in it, and that's why we have seen the example of the cat strangling. This is what the idea of completeness means by. Now, the second interesting point in the definition is of complete magnitude, complete and certain magnitude. Now, after understanding, I hope that we understand the idea of completeness. We hope that we have somehow defined what it means in Aristotelian sense, completeness. Now, let us move to the second thing of the definition, that is called as magnitude. What is mean by magnitude? Now, in one sense, it is trivial to say that a tragic plot must have certain magnitude, must have magnitude. A plot of zero event, or a plot of, sorry, zero extent, not event, a plot of zero extent would not be a plot at all, where you cannot extend it. Since it would contain no events, it will not extend. Why plot cannot extend? Because it is not carrying the events that are expected into it. Because events are coming in connected series with each other. Now, the real question Aristotle wants to raise is more interesting. What is the correct magnitude of the plot? What is the correct magnitude of a tragic plot? Because here he is simply talking on tragedy. He is not referring to comedy, he is talking to tragedy. Now, in practice, the time available for performance is a key determining factor, because for how long the play will run, for how long this play will go on. But this is what you can say is a contingent fact about the organization of particular theatrical event, and it throws no light on the art of poetry as such, because it is talking about the performative value. Now, if you look it very carefully, In principle, the upper limit is determined that what audience can grasp at one time. It has some it has to be possible for the audience to remember what is in the plot. But the lower limit is determined by the need for the plot to include a change from bad fortune to good fortune or from good fortune to bad fortune. We have defined it that there is a limit that when we talk of the three unities that he discusses in later on, if you look at it very seriously, that Aristotle is talking about the upper limit of the plot, that how much time shall be used that helps the audience to remember the possible understanding of what is mean by plot, what is in the plot. He can understand with that particular thing with a upper limit that it should not exceed. But in lower limit, there should be the plot should include the change from good fortune to bad fortune or bad fortune to good fortune. The plot must have sufficient scope for a change that should take place in the whole events. There should be sufficient scope. Moreover, it must take place in the way that is prescribed in the discussion of completeness. The change from one to another must be, please understand this very interestingly, it is already somehow part of, you can say, the idea underlined in the definition of completeness itself, understanding of completeness itself. That the change from one to another, from good to bad or bad to good, must be the results of the sequence of necessarily connected events. They should not have some different thing to be explained for. It should have the change in fortune. The plot, as I said, the upper limit is defined. What should be the what should it include into a plot? For example, if you see Oedipus, and when you see Oedipus, the whole sequence, the whole story, the whole plot is simply that there is a very severe sin which has taken place in the state and resulting it into the death of many people. What is that severe sin? That the whole plot based on that severe sin, giving its causes, that why this severe sin has taken place in the state and what would be its result. It has got a certain magnitude, it has got certain upper limit decided. That this is what it is explained. Now, how it will explain in this whole framework, in this framework of limited span, that we are not showing 300 years of life. We are showing one day in a life of that hero, according to Aristotle. One event, one event in the life of that particular hero. So upper limit is defined. Now within that upper limit, you have to complete your lower limit, that the plot should explain or should show the change from good fortune to bad fortune or bad fortune to good fortune. Now when this good fortune or bad fortune we are taking, it is already described in the understanding of completeness of well-formed plot in a tragedy or well-formed tragic plot, that all these things should appear in the connected in a sequence of necessarily connected events. If the uh, if a successful cat breeder wins a glittering prize and promptly commits suicide, the plot must show why he did so. Out of remorse for strangling his rival's cat, why he committed that suicide. If you remember Ben and Bill's story that I said to you, that means there is a new element of change in fortune in our discussion. Now, this change in fortune fits in with Aristotle's first argument for the primacy of plot. That's why he said that there is a primacy of plot. He focused on the primacy of plot. The change from good fortune to bad corresponds to the failure in action that evokes pity. Why we should feel pity for the hero of tragedy? Because there is a change from good fortune to bad fortune, and that's why we feel sad for the hero. Unless the plot of tragedy had sufficient scope to allow this change, if there is sufficient scope in showing the change from good to bad, then and then the emotional effect at which tragedy aims can be achieved. If there is no sufficient scope, then the emotional effect at which tragedy aims at will not be possible. That means it is correlated with each other. The change of fortune from good to bad has to be part of the plot with a limited, with a given scope of time. And if this scope allowed to such a change, then the expected emotional effect that tragedy aims at can be achieved. Now we must note, my friends, that Aristotle envisaged the changes of fortune going in either direction. A change from bad fortune to good is also mentioned as a possibility. There's a possibility of from bad to good fortune also, but this seems somehow surprisingly that what has a change to good fortune to do with fear and pity? If the character who is in bad fortune changes it to a good fortune, then how it will evoke pity and fear then? If there is a possibility, if you're talking about the change in fortune should have a complete scope in the allowed sequences of events, and if that took place from bad to good, then how this tragedy aims at purification, catharsis, how it will take place? Now, this is a question which needs to be understood very carefully. But this discussion we will continue when we'll reach to what are the best kinds of tragic plots that appeared in chapter number 13 and 14. That, as I said, that there are three stages that Aristotle has talked about plots. What is a best kind of tragic plot when it's talking about? We'll look at this question. Please remember this question at that time. Now we are talking about magnitude and completeness or wholeness. Now, when Aristotle discussed wholeness at the beginning of chapter 7, he talked about things following one on another in necessary consequences. And by the end of chapter 7, this requirement has been modified. Now, what is modified? Here we find a series of events occurring sequentially in accordance with probability or necessity. Now, please remember this phrase, probable and necessity and probability, that we have discussed even before when we are talking about imitation. The pairing of necessity with probability, this will recur throughout the poetics. Please remember this. You cannot say that, okay, probability and necessity with probability is part of what he discussed about imagination, imitation. No, it will occur throughout poetics. In other works, Aristotle explains these terms as referring to what happens always or usually. Even you will find out early in chapter number 7, he was willing to speak about things following necessarily or in general. Now, it is necessary that sun will rise tomorrow. It is necessary. Or you can say the sun always rises in the morning. Now it is probable, that is necessity. Sun is rising in the morning is necessary. Now it is probable that I'll get out of bed tomorrow morning in general. I do get up in the morning, but I might stay in the bed all the day. If I'm ill or have died or I'm feeling exceptionally idle, events in human sphere, human life are generally no more than probable. So, this qualification of initial formula makes it little more realistic. There are probabilities, there are necessaries. I have to get up in the morning is necessary. But I may not get up in the morning is also probable. Probably I may not get up early in the morning. That is necessary, I should get up in the morning. But not probably this time I will not get up in the morning. So probability, the qualification of this formula necessary with probability seems to be a little more realistic, my friends. Now, chapter number 8 introduces the concept of unity. Look at what is explained in chapter number 6, we have discussed. What is explained in chapter number 7, we have discussed what he's talking about. Chapter number 8, now we are pointing out that he discusses, introduces the concept of unity. Any imitation is unified if it imitates a single thing. It is unified, even if it imitates a single thing. So, An imitation of an action will be unified if it imitates a single action. Now, again, a question comes in our mind that what is the criteria? Or how we are going to judge the singleness of an action? What is meant by this single action? Because what you will say that, sir, you said earlier that there are consequences of necessary consequences of earlier action. And again, you are talking about unity should be in a single action. If it is imitating single action, it should be unified. What are we to judge singleness of an action? Now, please remember, it cannot mean a single event. It cannot mean a single event. There is a difference between event and action. Action will inevitably include a series of events. So you did not to get confused with the word single action with an event. If a tragic plot involves a change of fortune, this change of fortune is a single event, single action, which carries series of events in it. And the analysis of completeness tells us that it must be self-contained series of connected events. And so Aristotle's criteria of unity does not add anything in substance to this particular analysis of what you call of completeness. Nor we should you can expect, nor we should expect it more. Something which is complete and is whole is a unity. But it allows him to formulate a negative point more sharply. Now, the fact that a plot is concerned with action and experiences of a single person is not enough to make it unified, since there may be no necessary or probable connection between them. Consider another simple story for this to understand this. Once again, we'll come back to the Bill and Ben's story of strangling a cat. Now, Bill got a statement from the bank that the next day he strangled Ben's cat. Now, this is not a unified plot by Aristotle's criteria. As per the Aristotelian criteria, this is not a unified plot. Even though Bill is involved into it, Ben is involved into it, and Ben's cat is involved into it, strangling of cat is involved into it. Both the incidents we reported in the story are involved into it. There does not seem to be any necessary or probable connection between these two different events. That's why this is not a unity. You may say, sir, there is Bill, there is cat, there is Ben. All the things, three things are coming together. Strangling of cat is also becoming part of the story. It has nothing to do with the unity of that plot that we discussed. Nothing to do with the actions that we discussed about Bill and Ben strangling the cat. That means there should be, if you're talking about a single person like Bill, you're talking about, And all the events connected to Bill need not to be part of your actions. All the events of his life need not to be part of your actions. And that's why unity means what you